The tray flew across the room, crashing against the wall with a thunderous bang. Food scattered across the floor, shards of the broken plate glinting like accusations in the dim light. "I said I wasn't hungry," Alexander Montgomery roared, his handsome face contorted with rage. Those blue eyes, once praised by society magazines, now blazed with nothing but cold fury and desperation. Emma Johnson stood motionless in the center of the room, her white blouse spotted with droplets of spilled soup. She didn't cry, didn't tremble like the previous caregivers. Instead, she simply looked at Alexander with an eerily calm gaze. "You haven't eaten anything since morning," Emma said gently, her voice steady without a tremor. "Your body needs energy." "My body?" Alexander laughed bitterly, his voice dripping with self-loathing. "This body is nothing anymore. Just a useless pile of flesh sitting in this damned wheelchair." He shoved his wheels hard, sending the chair shooting forward. Emma quickly stepped aside. "And you?" Alexander pointed directly at Emma, his eyes burning with rage. "You're just a girl who needs money. Don't pretend to care about me. I know what you think about me. A pathetic cripple." "I don't think that," Emma replied, maintaining her calm tone. "Shut up," Alexander shouted. "I'm sick of that understanding voice. You don't understand anything. You don't know who I used to be. You don't know what I've lost." He slammed his hand down on the wheelchair's armrest, the sound echoing through the large room. "I used to run marathons. I used to climb mountains. I used to be a man that any woman would desire. And now?" Alexander laughed harshly, the sound painfully hollow. "Now I'm just a cripple that girls like you have to care for to earn money." Emma said nothing, just stood there and listened. This only made Alexander angrier. "Why don't you answer? Why don't you run away like the others?" He rolled closer to Emma, his gaze challenging. "Or do you think you're special? Think you can save me?" "I don't think I can save you," Emma finally spoke, "but I think you can save yourself." Alexander froze. In 2 years, no one had dared speak to him like that. "What did you say?" His voice became dangerous. "I said you're destroying yourself," Emma replied, showing the first hint of firmness in her voice. "You're letting pain control your life." "How dare you?" Alexander began to shout. "I dare," Emma interrupted, stepping closer to him. "I dare to speak the truth. You can be angry with me. You can yell at me. You can throw things. But that won't change the truth." Alexander stared at her with amazement and fury. No one had ever confronted him like this since the accident. "What truth?" he asked, his voice cold as ice. "The truth is that you're still alive," Emma said. "And as long as you're alive, you can still choose how to live." The room fell silent. Alexander stared at Emma, not knowing how to react. This girl, she was completely different from the others. "I'll clean this up," Emma said, pointing to the mess of food and broken dishes on the floor. "And I'll bring you another meal." "I won't eat it," Alexander said through gritted teeth. "That's fine," Emma shrugged, "but I'll still bring it. And I'll put it there." She pointed to the table near the window. "When you change your mind, you can eat." 15 minutes later, Emma returned with a fresh tray of food. This time she said nothing, simply placed the tray on the table as promised and began tidying the room. Alexander remained with his back turned, but he could hear every movement she made. The sound of her folding clothes, arranging books, wiping down furniture. There was no sound of anger or irritation. "Why don't you quit?" Alexander suddenly asked, still not turning around. Emma paused, looking toward his back. "Do you want me to quit? I want to know why you haven't quit yet." "The others couldn't stand it for more than a week. Maybe because I need this job," Emma answered honestly. Alexander turned his wheelchair around, looking at her with sharp eyes. "Is that all? For money?" Emma stopped arranging things, looking directly into his eyes. "Not just for money. I think everyone deserves care, no matter how difficult they are." "Difficult?" Alexander laughed sarcastically. "You call me difficult? You're trying to push me away," Emma said. "But I understand why. You don't understand anything. You're afraid," Emma said softly. "You're afraid that if you let someone get close, you'll be hurt even more." Alexander felt as if someone had slapped him. I'm not judging you," Emma continued. "I just want you to know that not everyone will hurt you." Alexander looked at her in silence. Then he rolled his chair to the table, looking at the tray of food Emma had prepared. A simple bowl of chicken soup, some slices of toasted bread, and a glass of orange juice. "I don't like orange juice," he said. "I'll remember for next time," Emma replied. This surprised Alexander. She didn't make excuses, didn't try to convince him to drink it, simply accepted and promised to change. He picked up the spoon, hesitantly looking at the bowl of soup. Then he began to eat, spoonful by spoonful. Slowly, Emma continued her work, pretending not to notice that Alexander was finally eating. But in her heart, she felt a small glimmer of hope. This was just the first step. But it was a first step. The following week passed in a series of small confrontations. Alexander still tried to push Emma away with cruel words and difficult behavior. But she never wavered. When he deliberately spilled water to force her to clean it up, Emma simply wiped it clean without complaint. When he called her at midnight with unreasonable requests, she still appeared with a patient smile. "Don't you ever get tired?" Alexander asked one afternoon, after he had just complained about how she arranged his books. "I do get tired," Emma admitted, "but I don't give up." "Why?" Emma stopped working, looking at him sincerely. "Because I believe that behind all this anger, there's a good man who's in pain." Alexander felt something tighten in his chest. "You're wrong." "Maybe," Emma shrugged, "but I want to find out for myself." That evening, as Emma prepared to leave the room after setting dinner for Alexander, he called her back. "Emma." She turned around, surprised. This was the first time he had called her name normally, without anger or contempt. "Thank you for the meal," he said, his voice so quiet she had to strain to hear. Emma smiled, the first genuinely bright smile since she had started working there. "You don't need to thank me for that," she said. "Sleep well, Alexander." Weeks passed, and the mansion began to transform completely. Alexander's room was no longer shrouded in darkness, curtains stayed open, books scattered across tables, and occasionally, genuine laughter echoed through the halls. Emma had quietly worked her magic, not through grand gestures, but through countless small acts of kindness and unwavering patience. Their relationship evolved from caregiver and patient to something resembling friendship. Alexander began asking Emma about her days, her dreams, her life before the Montgomery estate. In return, he slowly shared fragments of his own story, not just his pain, but cherished memories he thought were lost forever. "I used to climb mountains," Alexander told Emma one afternoon as they sat in the garden. Emma had convinced him to spend time outdoors, something he'd refused for 2 years. There was this peak in Colorado, the sunrise from the summit was he trailed off. Lost in memory. "Beautiful," Emma said softly, watching his face light up with recollection. "Yes," he said, surprised by his own smile. "It was beautiful." Emma noticed how his eyes crinkled when he smiled. Truly smiled, not the bitter smirks she'd grown accustomed to. Her heart did something strange in her chest, a flutter she tried to ignore. As autumn deepened, Alexander surprised everyone by asking Emma to tell him about her hometown. "You mention it often," he said. "Your family, your childhood. I want to understand what made you." So he searched for words. "So strong. Would you like to visit?" Emma asked impulsively, then immediately regretted it. "I mean, if you'd ever want to." "Yes," Alexander said without hesitation, surprising them both. The trip to Emma's small hometown required careful planning. William arranged for a modified van and contacted Emma's family. Her parents, warm, welcoming people who ran a small diner, prepared their modest home with wheelchair accessibility. When they arrived, Emma's mother, Sarah, greeted Alexander as if he were family. "Welcome, dear. Emma's told us so much about you. All terrible things, I'm sure," Alexander replied, but his tone held humor rather than bitterness. "Only that you're stubborn and brilliant." Emma's father, Tom, laughed, shaking Alexander's hand firmly. "Welcome to our chaos." For 3 days, Alexander experienced something he'd forgotten existed, genuine warmth. Emma's family treated him not as an invalid or a wealthy patron, but simply as Emma's friend. They included him in everything. Family dinners where everyone talked over each other, helping Tom fix the diner's old cash register, listening to Sarah's endless stories about Emma's childhood mishaps. Once she tried to rescue a cat stuck in a tree. Sarah laughed, showing Alexander photos, ended up stuck herself. The fire department had to rescue both of them. Alexander looked at Emma, who blushed furiously. "You never told me you were afraid of heights." "I'm not afraid," Emma protested. "I just respect them greatly." Watching Emma with her family, Alexander saw her completely, not just the caregiver who'd become his anchor, but the daughter who brought her mother flowers every morning. the sister who called her brother daily, the woman whose laughter filled every room she entered. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies, Alexander felt something shift inside him. Emma was telling a story about their neighbor's escaped chickens, her hands gesturing animatedly, eyes sparkling with mirth. The porch light caught the gold in her hair, and Alexander realized with startling clarity that somewhere along the way, he'd fallen in love. The realization both terrified and thrilled Alexander. For so long, he believed himself incapable of love, unworthy of it. Yet here was Emma, who'd seen him at his worst and stayed, who'd fought through his defenses with nothing but patience and kindness. Before they left, Alexander presented Emma with a small gift, an elegant silver bracelet with a moonstone. "To thank you," he said gently, "for showing me light again." Emma held the bracelet, her eyes misting. "Alexander, don't say anything," he smiled. "Just wear it and remember that you changed my life." On the drive back to New York, both remained quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. They had crossed the boundary from friendship to something deeper, and both could feel it. 2 weeks after their hometown trip, Alexander received an invitation to a party from an old friend, Marcus Wellington. It was the first time Alexander had accepted a social invitation after 2 years of isolation. "Would you like to come with me?" Alexander asked Emma, his voice tinged with nervousness. "I think I need someone by my side." Emma smiled warmly. "Of course, I'll go with you." That evening, Alexander wore a sharp black suit while Emma donned an elegant navy dress that William had prepared. The moonstone bracelet sparkled on her wrist. The party was held at a luxurious Manhattan hotel. When they arrived, Emma pushed Alexander's wheelchair through the crowd of guests. Many people stared, some whispered, but Alexander tried to remain composed. "I'll get us some drinks," Emma said after they found a quiet corner. "What would you like?" "Just orange juice," Alexander replied, forcing a smile. Emma left, leaving Alexander alone. He sat quietly, observing the crowd, feeling somewhat uncomfortable returning to social settings after hiding away for so long. Suddenly, a familiar voice rang out from behind. "Look here. Alexander Montgomery has decided to emerge from his cave." Alexander turned to see Bradley Hoffman, an old business rival who had always been jealous of the Montgomery family's success. Bradley stood there with a mocking smile, champagne glass in hand. "Bradley." Alexander nodded coldly. "How pitiful," Bradley said with fake concern. "From one of the city's most eligible bachelors to this." He gestured toward the wheelchair. "I suppose beautiful women aren't interested in you anymore, are they?" Alexander gritted his teeth, gripping the wheelchair's armrests tightly, but said nothing. He had learned to endure such cruel comments. "Oh, or did you hire a beautiful caregiver to pretend to care?" Bradley continued with a sneer. "Money can buy anything, can't it?" Just then, Emma appeared from the crowd, carrying 2 glasses. She saw Bradley standing near Alexander with a hostile attitude and immediately understood the situation. "Is there a problem here?" Emma asked, her voice cold. Bradley turned to look at her, smirking. "Ah, this must be the companion Alex hired? You're quite beautiful, but is it really necessary to pretend to care about a cripple?" What happened next occurred so quickly. Emma set both glasses down on a nearby table, turned around, and threw a punch straight at Bradley's face. A sharp pop echoed as her fist found its target. Bradley staggered backward, clutching his bleeding nose. "Are you insane? Don't you ever speak about Alexander like that again," Emma said, enunciating each word clearly, her eyes blazing with anger. "He's worth 10 times more than someone like you." Bradley looked around, seeing everyone watching, and hurried away with an embarrassed, furious expression. Emma turned back to Alexander, who was looking at her with amazement and love. "You didn't need to do that," Alexander said softly. "Yes, I did," Emma replied firmly. "No one has the right to speak badly about you." They looked at each other in silence, the air around them seeming to stand still. Then Alexander smiled and opened his arms. "Sit on my lap," he said gently. Emma was surprised. "What? Trust me?" Emma hesitated briefly, then carefully sat on Alexander's lap. He wrapped his arms around her, then began maneuvering the wheelchair to move gently in rhythm with the music playing in the ballroom. They moved across the floor as if dancing, Emma giggling as Alexander skillfully spun the wheelchair. The other guests stopped talking to watch, but this time not out of pity, but admiration. "What are you doing?" Emma asked. her eyes bright with joy. Dancing with you, Alexander replied, looking straight into her eyes. In my own way. When the music ended, they stopped in the middle of the floor. Emma and Alexander gazed at each other at close distance, breathing heavily from excitement. Their eyes said everything words couldn't express. In that moment, Emma realized clearly. She had loved Alexander Montgomery for a very long time. Alexander, she whispered, I love you. His eyes lit up, but then darkened again. Emma, don't say anything. She placed her finger on his lips. I just want you to know. I love you, not out of pity, not for money, but for exactly who you are. Alexander caught her hand, bringing it to his lips for a gentle kiss. I love you too, he whispered against her palm. More than I ever thought possible. They returned to the Montgomery estate that night in comfortable silence, both knowing that everything had changed between them. When they reached Alexander's room, he caught Emma's hand as she prepared to leave. Stay, he said simply. Emma looked into his eyes, seeing vulnerability there that took her breath away. Alexander, just stay with me tonight. I don't want to be alone. Emma nodded, settling into the chair beside his bed. They talked through the night, about dreams and fears, about the past and the uncertain future. As dawn broke through the windows, Emma had fallen asleep in the chair, her hand still clasped in Alexander's. William found them that way in the morning and quietly retreated, a knowing smile on his weathered face. He had hoped for this moment for 2 long years. Over the following days, their love bloomed like flowers after a long winter. Alexander was gentler, more open than Emma had ever seen him. He spoke of plans, places he wanted to show her, books he wanted to share, a future he was beginning to believe in again. But love, Emma would soon learn, sometimes carries the heaviest burdens. One evening, as they sat together in the garden watching the sunset, Alexander's face grew serious. Emma, there's something I need to tell you. She looked at him, noting the sudden tension in his voice. What is it? Alexander took her hands in his touch trembling slightly. About my condition, there's more to it than just the paralysis. Emma's heart began to race as she saw fear creeping back into his eyes. Not the angry fear she'd first encountered, but something deeper, more devastating. Alexander looked at Emma with eyes full of love but also overflowing with pain. He slowly took her hand, brought it to his lips for a gentle kiss, then softly pushed it away. Emma, he said, his voice trembling, you don't understand. Don't you love me? Emma asked, her eyes beginning to redden. No. Alexander shook his head, tears streaming down. I love you. I love you so much that my heart aches every time I think about having to leave you. Then why? Emma whispered, confused. Alexander turned his wheelchair toward the window, gazing at the star-filled night sky. Because you deserve a better life. You deserve a man who can stand beside you, walk with you, truly dance with you. Alexander, I don't need those things. But I do. Alexander turned back, his eyes burning. I need to know that the person I love can have all the best things in life. Emma moved closer, kneeling beside the wheelchair. You are all the best things in my life. I don't want anyone else. Alexander placed his hand on Emma's cheek, wiping away her tears. There's something I haven't told you. His voice became serious, making Emma worried. My condition, it's not just paralyzed legs. Alexander continued. The doctors discovered that my spinal cord damage is spreading. Gradually, it will affect other organs. Emma felt the world spinning. What do you mean? I probably only have 1 more year. Alexander said gently, as if discussing the weather. Maybe less. No. Emma burst into tears. That can't be. We can find other doctors. New treatments. Emma, I've tried everything. Alexander interrupted. I've traveled the world, met top specialists. There's no hope. Emma clutched his hands tightly, sobbing uncontrollably. Then we'll face this together. I'll take care of you until the very end. Alexander slowly shook his head. That's exactly what I don't want. I don't want you to watch me gradually weaken, lose my dignity. What are you talking about? Emma looked at him with frightened eyes. Alexander took a deep breath, preparing for the most difficult words of his life. I've decided to go to Switzerland. Emma didn't understand immediately, but when the meaning of those words reached her, she felt like lightning had struck. You're planning assisted dying? She whispered. It's the only choice. Alexander said firmly. I was once an active, independent person. I can't accept becoming a burden to anyone, especially you. You're not a burden. Emma screamed. You're my love. Because you love me. You must understand. Alexander gripped her hands tightly. This is the only way I can leave with dignity, while still being myself. Emma shook her head frantically. I can't let you do this. Am I not strong enough to stay by your side? No, darling. Alexander stroked her hair. You're stronger than anyone I've ever known. But I love you too much to let you witness me falling apart day by day. Then what can I do? Emma cried, feeling absolutely hopeless. Support my decision. Alexander pleaded. Understand that this is how I choose to love you, by giving you freedom. Emma stood up, backing away as if he had just struck her. I can't. I love you. Alexander, I can't live without you. You can, and you will. Alexander said decisively. You'll live a wonderful life. Love someone worthy of you. And have beautiful children. That's what I want for you. Emma turned her back to him, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I need time to think. I understand, Alexander said gently. But darling, don't take too much time. I want our final days to be filled with love, not tears. Emma ran from the room, leaving Alexander alone in the darkness. His heart shattered into tiny pieces for having to lose love in order to protect it. The next morning, Emma had vanished from the Montgomery estate. William found a brief note on the desk. I need time. I will return. Emma drove for 5 hours to reach her hometown, tears streaming down her face the entire way. She didn't know how to accept losing the person she loved, but she also didn't know how to stop him. When Emma walked into the house, her mother Sarah was preparing lunch. One look at her daughter's tear-stained face, and Sarah immediately dropped everything and opened her arms wide. Oh honey, what's wrong? Sarah held Emma tightly as she collapsed in her mother's embrace. Emma sobbed uncontrollably, telling her mother everything, about her love for Alexander, about his condition, about his decision to go to Switzerland. Sarah listened without saying a word, just stroking her daughter's hair and letting her cry out all her tears. I don't know what to do, Emma whispered after she stopped crying. How can I let him go? But how can I force him to stay if he's suffering? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window where Emma's father was tending to their small garden. Sweetheart, your father and I have been married for 30 years, she said gently. I've learned one thing. Loving someone isn't about keeping them by your side. Love is wanting the best for them, even when it breaks your heart. But Mom, I can't live without him. Emma gasped. You think you can't? Sarah smiled sadly. But you'll learn how to live. What matters is that in his final days, you can give him the greatest gift. Understanding and selfless love. Emma looked at her mother with red-rimmed eyes. You mean I should go with him? I mean you should do what you know is right in your heart. Sarah took her daughter's hands. If you truly love him, you won't let him face his final days alone. That night, Emma lay in her childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling with thousands of thoughts crowding her mind. She thought about Alexander, about how he laughed when she told silly stories, about how he looked at her with eyes full of love. The next morning, Emma found her decision. She called William. William, I'm coming back, she said with a determined voice. And I'm going to Switzerland with him. Are you certain? William asked, his voice relieved. Absolutely certain. He won't face this alone. 2 weeks later, Emma and Alexander were at an elegant clinic in Geneva, Switzerland. The preceding days had passed like a beautiful dream. They spent time together without speaking of the approaching death, simply treasuring every remaining moment. They visited museums, sat by Lake Geneva watching sunsets, shared romantic candlelit dinners. Alexander told Emma about dreams he'd never fulfilled, while Emma shared the future she had once imagined for them. If I had more time, Alexander said one evening as they sat on their hotel balcony, I would propose to you properly. I would get down on one knee, even though I couldn't stand back up. Emma laughed through tears. I already said yes, long ago. On their final night, they lay together in bed. Emma held in Alexander's arms. Neither could sleep, just treasuring the feeling of being together. Do you have any regrets? Emma asked softly. About loving you? Never. Alexander kissed the top of her head. That was the best thing that ever happened to me. The next morning, Emma woke before Alexander. She sat beside him, looking at his peaceful face in sleep, trying to etch that image deep into her memory. Alexander slowly opened his eyes, saw Emma, and smiled. Hello, my angel. Hello, Emma replied, trying to maintain her smile. You know, Alexander said, his voice weaker than the day before. From the day you walked into my life, I learned how to love completely. Not just loving you, but loving myself through your eyes. Emma gripped his hand tightly, tears beginning to fall. You must promise me something. Alexander continued, live wonderfully. Love again when you're ready. Have beautiful children and tell them about the man who once loved their mother more than life itself. I promise, Emma whispered. Alexander closed his eyes one final time, a smile still on his lips. I love you, Emma Johnson, forever. Emma leaned down to kiss his forehead, tears falling like rain. I love you too, Alexander Montgomery, to the ends of the universe. A week later, in William's office at the Montgomery estate, Emma sat at the desk with empty eyes. William placed before her a thick envelope and a bank card. These are what Alexander left for you, William said gently. Emma opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a handwritten letter. My dearest Emma, there are many things I wanted to say but couldn't, because too many emotions would make you waver. When you read these lines, I will be free from pain, and I hope you too will find peace. The money in the account isn't enough for you to spend your whole life, but it's enough to buy you freedom. Walk forward with confidence, so I know you still have the chance to enjoy life. You will forever live in my heart. From the moment you walked into my life with your sweet smile and that stubborn determination to see good in me, I knew you were my destiny. You never gave up on me, even when I had given up on myself. Don't think about me with sadness. I don't want you to be heartbroken. Live well, and live fully. Remember that angry man who threw food at you? You transformed him into someone capable of love again. That is your gift, Emma. That is your magic. I will always be beside you on every path you take. When you laugh, I'll be there. When you love again, I'll be there, cheering you on. When you have children, I'll be there in the stories you tell them about courage and kindness. Thank you for showing me that even in darkness, there can be light. Thank you for proving that love doesn't need perfect circumstances. It just needs a perfect heart. Yours was always perfect. Love you forever and always. Alexander. Emma clutched the letter to her chest, crying for the love of her lifetime, but also smiling through her tears. Because for a brief, shining moment, she had loved and been loved completely. And that, she realized, was enough to last forever.